Hi, my name is Mike Campbell. I am one of the assistants in the Center for Creativity. So this is meant to be for somebody who is brand new at painting, acrylic painting. We will try and touch a little bit on perspective here as we go, color mixing. This is going to be a wet on wet technique. I believe it's 14 by 7 canvas. So for this workshop, you will need some sort of material to work on. So this is a multimedia paper. You can use anything except for printer paper pretty much, as long as it's a thicker paper or any canvas. You will need tape if you're using paper to make sure that stays down. If you don't have tape, that's fine. The paint will weigh it down. It's just a little harder at first to work with. This is just some water. I wanted to make this as simple as possible. So a palette knife, if you don't have a palette knife, whatever substitute you have might not be as good as a palette knife for what we will do, because this will be the major tool we are relying on for this workshop. But it's a beginner workshop. We encourage experimenting. If you don't have a palette knife, that's just fine. You can try and do it with a paintbrush too. Does anyone have any specific dimensions for the paintbrush that they have? I'm going to use one like this. I do have bigger ones that I can show. I wanted to keep this just 2 tools, so this way it is easy and you didn't have to go buy a whole set of brushes or something to do this workshop with. Same with the paints. I'm going to mix all of the colors. We will be using white acrylic paint, which is what you'll need the most of, black acrylic paint, and then yellow, red, and blue. So everybody is going to probably have slightly different versions of these colors, which is fine. Again, I encourage you to experiment and play around. You will probably not get an exact replica as mine. As I said, I have done this 5 times. It's turned out different every time. Oh, and I have my palette, a rag in case I need to wipe my brush off, which it's good to have a rag or paper towels because you will be wiping off your palette knife often. And then I have this board for when I'm doing my painting, and then I just have another piece of cardboard. This is just so I have something to put the finished product on that is not the wet cardboard. So this is the first one. It's on canvas. Canvas is a fabric, so it absorbs, I mean, paper is a fabric too, but canvas is a little thicker, so it will absorb a little more of the pigment. So this one looks a little different than all of the ones I did on paper. And then I have these in an order of sort of the process I did with them. So we're going to start by smothering the whole canvas or paper in white paint. So this one is the most white paint. I did not wipe as much off. The more white paint you have, the more pastel and washed out the colors will look, but it does give you more time to work with the colors and blend things. The less white paint you put on it, the quicker it's going to dry. Second most, I tried doing some different brush techniques here, but it got a little streaky. This one, I did not paint my corners when I was done. Mistakes happen. So I was able to get a little more detail. I did try brushing the different details in, so it does have more of a brush look to it in some places. And then this one, I put very little white paint down. I wiped most of the paint that I put on the paper off. Very pigmented compared to the other ones, but because of that, when I got to the clouds and the waves here, my paint was already pretty dry, so I did not get those blended in the same way as they did with the other one. So the first thing that we will do is we're going to mix some colors. You will need more yellow than anything else. You don't have to put it all in one tray because we will be dividing some of that out. Besides, and we need some white here. So besides these 5 colors, we will also need orange, green, and brown. Okay, so for orange, you will need more yellow than red, but you will need yellow and red to make orange. Make sure you are wiping off your palette knife in between dipping it into a new well. And I have a preference for more pastel colors like this. Right, and then green, so yellow. I'm going to try and get about an equal amount of blue. For me personally, I'm just going to literally dip my palette knife into the black and add that little bit of black into the green. You don't have to do this if you want vibrant colors, adding that little bit of black just helps dull the color. You can do that, in fact, with any of these colors if you don't like any of your primaries, or this orange or the brown. So the last color is brown. So similar to orange. And this is sometimes one of the hardest things for people to mix, depending on what versions of the primary color pigments you have. If yours are closer to mine, this will probably be easier for you. If you have a darker red or a darker blue, it can sometimes be a bit trickier. Just going to start with a little bit of blue. Don't go all in if you aren't comfortable doing so. It's fine just to do a little at a time until you get the right color, like I just did to get. If you notice, you can sort of see a dominant color coming out of this. Right now it's very green looking. So what you would do if you were using the color wheel, you would take the opposite color on the color wheel, which is red for green, it is blue for orange, and it's yellow for purple. So you just kind of just want to keep on adjusting until you get a more yellow brown. Okay, so I think this is close to the color I want for my sand. I'm going to tape down. If you are taping down paper, try and get it as close to the corner as you can. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is you're going to take your white, and if you put it on your palette and you want to go from the palette to the paper because you feel more comfortable, that's fine. Again, gives you more control. So another thing that's going to happen, especially if you're not used to doing this with a palette knife, this probably will happen to me during this demo, is that you will probably dip into your paper with part of the edge of the palette knife, which you just have to smooth it over. So now you just want to try and get as even as possible a layer of white paint on your surface. And if you're finding your palette knife is dipping into the paper too much, wipe off some of the paint from the palette knife. And I know it was hard to see on my examples, but they are all slightly textured, except for the one on the canvas because it absorbed some of the texture, but texture is fine. Texture adds character. A lot of art has texture in it. So I'm sure there are spots that I've slightly missed. It's hard to tell. It is white paint. We'll fix it. Wiping off my palette knife. If you want to mark it with your palette knife, you can. Where you want your skyline to be. If you want it to be halfway through the paper, that's fine. If you want more sky than water, you can do it lower. If you want more water than sky, you can go higher. There are more colors in the sky, so I would say err on the side of giving your sky colors, which are normally, to me, the more exciting colors. I like warm colors, and it pretty much will be warm colors, cooler colors. So we're going to take our yellow first and just put it on the canvas. You're going to blend this. So as you're doing this and as we add colors, you always want to make sure that you're kind of aware of where the color is on your palette knife, because now that it's there, like even if I wanted to blend this bottom area more, I still want to keep it up, or I have to wipe off my palette knife because if I go like this, it's going to get all that yellow further down. And because we will be adding colors to go up, that is an important thing to keep in mind from the get-go. So what I just did was what I was talking about, where it will likely dip into the paper as you go. If you need more yellow, feel free to grab more yellow. Okay, so now we're going to go orange. And if you want more or less of any specific color, feel free to do it. This is normally the progression of the colors. Sometimes it's more red, sometimes there's more blue. Really depends on where the sun is. Once it dries a little bit, we can go back in with some yellow and add a specific area where you want the sun to be. And if you need to mix more paint because you didn't mix enough and it's slightly a different color, just have to blend it. It'll be fine. So here's where you want to make sure that you are not going down more, because you will start to get orange in your yellow. You do want it to blend a little bit. That is part of this process. You just don't want your yellow to become all orange. And if you do something you really like, even if you think it's an accident or isn't how it's supposed to be, but you like it, keep it. So the best way is to try and keep your knife as flat as possible. as you're doing this. If you turn, that's where you're more likely to get some dips. Okay. I think I like my orange like that. Now we're going to go on to the red. If you don't want red, you want more orange, that's fine. So the only thing I will say about not using red in this skyline is if you want there to be a blue top, which is where we're going to do one layer of blue. You do not want blue and orange next to each other because, as I said about the color wheel, they are opposites and they will make a brown. So I always add a nice layer of red because it will make purple with the blue. You can also add a layer of purple if you so desire. If you also want it to be more pink and you want to pre-mix it before you put it on the canvas, you can do that. So I'm just going, I wiped off the tip and now I'm just going to go across where the orange and red meet. Try and blend the red down just a little bit. So I'm just taking over the red and then coming down with just a little bit of red on the knife. Now I'm going to add blue. And just like the other between layers, I will wipe that off. Try and pick up just a little bit of the blue. So I'm just gonna get some new blue. And if you want to take your tape off, it's probably all right now because your canvas is pretty saturated and probably won't roll back up or move now. So lift your tape up and fix your corners. Okay. So now we're going to start with the green. So this is going to be a pretty thin layer, at least on mine. So one thing to note about perspective is as things go back, they tend to get a little darker, and so I'm going to emulate that a bit with the darker blue-green that I made, but most of this will blend into the blue from the water. So just try and go right along where you want your skyline to be. And if you get green in the sky and you need to fix it, don't forget to wipe off your palette knife first so you don't make it worse. And if you can't fix it, that's fine. You can go back in with clouds later. Clouds will fix everything if you make a mistake in the sky. Now we're going to go blue. I put a lot of blue on because I'm really going to blend up into the green. And really, for me, I just want the green to be right on the line where the sky and water meet. Now, the good thing is with the next transition into the brown, your blue line does not have to be even because waves are not a straight line. If you want to bring some of your blue up more, like I did in some of the examples, I think almost all of them, I have some form of bringing things at an angle, where that one has some area with a lot of water. Take creative liberties here. I probably did not make enough brown. And if you find your white is drying out a bit, again, you can add some white. Because now will be the point that if you did a relatively medium or thin sized coat, it will probably start to dry. And it also depends, of course, on the humidity in your house or apartment or location right now. I think I want a little more. So if you want to be a bit reckless and not remix the entire color, I want this to be a little more yellow anyway. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of yellow. And if you find you're getting a lot of blue, then you don't have to mix it so far up into your water because we are going to put some of the foam that is in water sort of on that water line to fix that. Here is where you will want your paintbrush. Keep water standing by just in case you need to clean off your brush. And for this, for my example, I will do a little bit of a lighter cloud this time since I've done several stormy clouds. So I'm just going to take white. So these will still interact with the colors we have in our skyline a bit, which is what we want. So don't get alarmed when your cloud starts to take on a little bit of the red. So if you know anything about perspective, you will know that you always have a middle point. On landscape painting that is pretty flat and uneventful as far as trees and houses. Your vanishing point will be your horizon line. So what that means is that as clouds come closer to you, they will be on the top of your painting. So any clouds you put closer to where your skyline is, those will be smaller. So these clouds are smaller because they are farther away. That will apply once we get down here too. As you go further back into the water, the waves will get smaller. So like this little line's pretty thin, and then as we get closer, they make the foamy waves a little bigger. If you have a bigger brush, you can try and do this with a palette knife. It will take some working with if you want a thin line, but if you have a smaller brush like this one, I'm just going to wet it. Try and get all the water off, but just get it to as much of a point as possible. I'm just gonna dip into the gray I made. So the gray will be the bottom of the clouds, and the closer you get to the top of the cloud, the more white you will have. So again, back to my example here. It's hard to see because I didn't do a lot of white on that one, but there we go. I think we're focusing a bit. There's white on the top. Same with all my clouds. And if you do get thicker clouds on the bottom, that's fine. There are also large cloud systems that happen far away. So if they take up the entirety of the back of your painting, then it might be a little too big. You're also losing a lot of the sunset you just made. So I'm going to try and do all of my gray here first, and then I will go back with the white on the top. So I'm just pretty much stippling, which is dabbing with the paintbrush. You can drag it if you want. You will get more interaction with the color you put down. When you are just dabbing it like I was, it's less interaction. You're going to get more of this darker pigmented color closer to what you mixed. The closer you get, the more you're going to have sort of that cloud fluff appearance. So you can start to be a little more strokey with your brush if you want. The clouds towards the top are going to have the largest bottom area because, again, they are closer. And then you will make sure your brush is clean. Going to take white and go right over the top. So for all of my clouds, I try and have almost as much white as gray or black, but I do leave just slightly more. And if your clouds are layered, if you're doing layered clouds, you'll do sort of how I did here, where you will have just a little bit of white on the top, and then on the bottom of the cloud that is closer to you, so whichever one is closer to the top, you'll darken that just a little bit more. I'm just taking a little black because I want to darken this a bit. So this way I don't end up with black clouds. I'm just going to use that little dab there for the whole thing. Okay, so now is where you can choose where you want your sun to be. I want my sun to be right here in the middle. So you're just going to add straight yellow. You don't even have to add a sun if you have something that looks like a sun. I have, for some of those examples, it already looked like there was a spot where there was more yellow, so I didn't add extra yellow for a sun. Okay, and wherever your sun is or would be, you're just going to take a little bit of the yellow. And this is just the sun reflecting off of the water. Doesn't have to be a whole lot. If you want, you can take the side of your brush and just sort of give yourself some yellow as if they are reflecting on where the waves are. And then I'm wiping in between doing this. I'm going to come back in, paintbrush, just make sure I'm not getting yellow where I really don't want it. Okay, so last thing you're going to do here, you're just going to take white, similar to what we did with the clouds. You don't have to do your whole water line. If you ever, have been to the beach and seen how the waves go, sometimes like the foam line, like in this one, will come front a little. Sometimes there are some waves that, form that overlap. Experiment, play around. You did this in an hour. You can hopefully do it again in an hour or less. So when I'm not taking breaks, I normally can do this in about 45 minutes. Let's say that I want this specific wave to come up a little. So again, as you're going further back, you do want it to get smaller. Then I could keep it going, or I could bring it back forward. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say exactly how waves connect or continue. They just kind of happen. And then if you want, you can take, I'm using just a little bit of white. Again, think of perspective. And this looks like a wave. It's not supposed to, so for continuity's sake, if you want it to look a little cleaner, try and face your waves all the same direction. I could darken this cloud a little. It's a little hard to see it on camera. And I'm wiping off as I go because I don't want nearly as much black as what was happening there for a second. Still kind of blends in on camera, but that's okay. Thank you, everybody. If you want, you can also share your examples with us. You can send them to us at creative.pitt.edu and we can share them on our social media.